Time now for part 2 of my demolition of Umar Johnson's dissertation. We've had a lot of fun so far, and the fun continues. I've already generated some criticism. The complaints from Umar's fans are almost as stupid as Umar's dissertation, so I shrugged that off pretty easily. I mean,
who are you to criticize such a great man who has dedicated his life to building a Pan-African school for students with our money?
But then again, who are Umar's followers to criticize me, given that they're pretty dumb? Others like Mark Lamont Hill on Twitter raised valid points. For example, my claim about the rigor demanded of dissertation research is based on my experience conducting PhD research, and I often forget that this is a PsyD dissertation that we're analyzing. Guilty as charged. Although that doesn't let Umar off the hook, because his dissertation doesn't even meet whale shit standards. Also, I said that in my opinion, dissertation research shouldn't be based on archival data. I agree with Mark that that is too strong of a statement, but I should add that I inserted a note saying that my comment didn't necessarily apply to all fields. But fair enough. So, it's time. Let's get on with the show. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
I spent quite some time in my last video hemming and hawing over whether Umar used archival data for his study. Why the big to-do? Well, if Umar conducted a study on human subjects, but told the Institutional Review Board that it was archival, that would wipe out his dissertation. So, it's a big deal. Umar mentions numerous times that his study was purely archival. However, I felt that throughout the dissertation he talked about the study in a manner that made it seem that he did, in fact, conduct research on human subjects. Now, I'm going to back away from that claim. The source of his data seems to be Tamara Thomas Smith, who was an assistant principal at a school called, and I'm not making this up, Leslie Pinckney Hill Elementary School. Even though it's called an elementary school, it included grades 7 through 8, which jives exactly with the grades that Umar needed to conduct his study. Now, that school closed in 2009, so she moved on to another school, Sheridan West Academy, but that school didn't teach the grades that Umar covered in his study. Therefore, I suspect that the data was collected at Hill Elementary. And since the school closed in 2009, Umar couldn't have conducted his study on those students directly because he hadn't started his doctoral program yet. As such, Thomas Smith must have been the one that conducted the data collection, making the data used in Umar's study purely archival. Why did Thomas Smith collect this data? Who knows? I couldn't find it published anywhere. Umar claims that the data was collected during the 2007 to 2008 school year, which makes sense. She had already completed her EDD well before then, so it wasn't for that. Whatever the case, it appears that Thomas Smith had this data, and somehow Umar found out about it and asked if he could use it in his study. I guess. That's all I can do. This is why we identify our data sources. We shouldn't have to piece this together. By the way, my buddy Brian has reached out to Thomas Smith for clarification on this issue. I'll let you know how she responds, if she does. In the end, Umar had a very easy study to conduct. The IRB approval process would have been a snap. He wouldn't have had to create questionnaires, sanitize personal identities, arrange for survey administration, record the data, none of that. And in no way, shape, or form did he spend much time preparing a quality dissertation. Let's read a portion of Chapter 3. The sample of this archival study was comprised of 101 student participants. And yeah, he puts the word archival before study all the time. That also raised my suspicions. The sample included 53 female participants and 46 male participants. And as I noted before, 53 and 46 don't make 101.
dummy.
The overwhelming majority of students identified their racial heritage as black, followed by African American. Okay. However, all participants would be correctly identified as African American. So some students claim to be black, but Umar is having none of that. If you consider yourself black, well, you're just wrong, and you get reclassified according to what he thinks you are. Gee, I wonder why we use checkboxes rather than open-ended responses for collecting demographic data. For example, a student might write Indian, but you don't know if that means American Indian or Asian Indian. Checkboxes, they're a good idea. It goes on to say that 40% were Christians and just as many claimed no religion, which still leaves 20%. Were they Muslim? If 20% of your population is Muslim, that could have significant effects on your self-concept analysis. But Umar just leaves us guessing. What's missing in this paragraph? The number of special education students who can gum up the works in any educational study. In some states, this number can be very high. And guess which states have the highest percentages of special ed students? New York, Maine, and Pennsylvania. Where was this study conducted? Oh yeah, Philadelphia. According to Philadelphia School District, 15% of its students are classified as special ed, but 72% of those in the emotional support category, which is extremely pertinent to this study on relating self-concept to achievement, were black. In sum, a very sizable population of those in this study were likely special ed, with the overwhelming majority of those deemed in need of emotional support. Maybe. We can't know because Umar never bothered to run the numbers. The problem with archival data is that you can't always disaggregate it according to student disability categories. The students have long moved on. But Thomas Smith should have had access to such special education data. At the very least, I would have told Umar that he needed to acknowledge this problem in the limitations of the study section, and hope to beat hell that the graduate committee still thinks the data is meaningful. So, one paragraph loaded with issues. Keep in mind, 5 people on his graduate committee were handed the responsibility of reviewing his dissertation before he defended. None of them apparently noticed these discrepancies, although they pop out with even a cursory glance. If you can't be bothered to even read the student's dissertation and provide feedback, then don't serve on a graduate committee. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not a social scientist. How dare I point out such potential factors? Only veteran social scientists can understand how being in an emotional support category of special ed could influence a student's self-worth and academic achievement. And if you ever have the misfortune of having me on your graduate advisory committee, just kidding. I'm actually a good dude who will work with you to make your dissertation something special, something that you can be proud of. The fact that I'm not a social scientist actually provides me with a perspective that you might need to hear. I find Appendix B interesting. It contains a questionnaire that was delivered to students to complete. By whom? We can only guess it's Tamara Thomas Smith. The first 2 questions are loaded. How has being black affected your performance in school? And how has being black affected the way you feel about yourself? Both questions presume that being black affects the respondents in their school performance or self-concept, which can bias the results. Besides, the central focus of this research was to question whether being black affects students in some way. These questions presume it. On top of that, Question 5 asks, why do you think you do well or not do so well in school? But you've already planted the idea in question 1 that one reason is their skin color. Question 3 asks, what does being black mean to you? I don't think a middle schooler would know how to respond to that. But, what does that even mean? Yes, creating valid and reliable open-ended questions is hard, but it's doctoral level research. It's not meant to be easy. Oh, you have to chuckle at the use of the word black, because as far as Umar is concerned, these kids are not black, they're African American. Black is incorrect. So is this questionnaire worth anything? No. The problems with the questions are simply too severe. But Umar will still cherry pick a few responses that meet his political worldview, but that's for another video. We're just beginning, so stay tuned for more videos on Umar's dissertation. Like my video and subscribe to my channel.